because this requires all of us to lead, all of us to dig deep into the solutions that work, and to treat this crisis as the crisis that it is, an emergency, a humanitarian emergency in Los Angeles, not unique to this city, but certainly one that we see powerfully here. And on a rainy day, we feel that we might avoid a few droplets going between our bus or our car and our place of work or our home. There are folks out there who are struggling to make sure where they call home is not flooded. And I do want to say that we have our HOPE teams out. We're working with our service providers in all of the areas that are most vulnerable during raining and flooding. That includes LA River and other river basins, our flood basins, enhanced checks, enhanced outreach. Those are outreach workers, those are LAPD officers as well. And we do have beds that are available. Our winter shelters are operating in full force, which I'll get to, thanks to the good work of LASA County and the city together. I also want to say one thing at the outset, because there was some news this morning about proposed movement forward, not proposed, now there's confirmation of moving forward, the Department of Agriculture, to cut folks off of food stamps in America. We don't know exactly how many people this would affect in Los Angeles, but we know it's at least tens of thousands of people who rely on food stamps on top of the hard work that they do to be able to support their families and feed their children. And it seems absolutely unconscionable that we would have an administration in Washington at a moment when so many Americans are still suffering that would literally take away the ability for them to feed their children. And when people ask where homelessness comes from, there's a lot of straws that break the camel's back. You'll hear one of those stories today. But it is a family usually struggling to make ends meet. And something like pulling one more piece of the rug out from underneath them, including food stamps, will result in more people being homeless in this city and around the country. So I wanted to say something about that as well. When we first started tracking our homelessness budget back in 2015, I'd like to remind we were spending about $18 million from the city on response to this crisis. This past year, that number was $462 million into housing, into services, into support and other solutions, a 25-fold increase. That is the evidence of our commitment. And as I said, there's no city in America that's doing more than Los Angeles, but there's no city that is doing enough or that can do enough without the help of all of our federal, state, county partners as well. As many of you know, one of those key partners and leaders on Monday announced a new chapter in his life, and he's here with us today, Peter Lynn. And I've been talking about him, I was just telling him without him in the room, so now it gives me great joy to be able to say this in front of him. He's led this agency for 5 years, a historic and monumental chapter. We talked 5 years ago about coming on board, and we've seen us go from 25 outreach workers to 800. We've seen hundreds of millions of dollars of new funding come forward, the advocacy at the state level, the use of metrics to track what works. And I say 1 year of leading on this issue is like a dog year. So 5 years might be 5 on the calendars, but I know you feel it's like 35 years of your life and your soul and your spirit. And I just want to thank you, because it is really difficult and even not as traumatizing as being homeless, but it is traumatizing work to deal with, you know, the volume of stories and people out there. And I'm just so grateful for your leadership through the largest expansion in our history. I'll give you some of your stats. You've helped us house 80,000 real living people. The number overwhelms our ability to picture it and to hear those stories, but you've deployed critical resources. You've reformed how we deliver our services. You've helped us translate Measure H from a successful ballot initiative into an army of workers. And you've come in a generational shift of how we address homelessness, and I'm just really grateful. I hope those of you who aren't pressed, because I know you can't do this, will give you a round of applause, and thank you for the work that you have done. And I only wish you the best in the years ahead, and I'm really excited about your advice as we open up our next chapter at LASA. But all of our partners who are working on that mission, keeping our streets clean and safe, opening shelters, building housing, and advocating the resources that we need. Each briefing, as I always say, it's those 4 things. What are we doing on the streets? What are we doing with shelter? How are we getting supportive housing out there that's permanent? And then what sort of partnerships are we working on in advocacy? But before we go through those 4, each one of these briefings, we begin with new announcements. So let me go through a few of those right now. And let me start with one that goes right to our most vulnerable Angelinos, our kids. I don't know if some of you were there yesterday as Nuri Martinez became our president-elect of the City Council, but she spoke very powerfully about, as a former school board member and as a child who grew up in a working-class family in the Valley, what it means when a city has homeless children going to our schools. And you'll remember the powerful LA Times series that Steve Lopez had, a series of columns on childhood poverty, where we looked at one of those schools, Telfair Elementary School in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, where about a quarter of the students were discovered to have experienced homeless sometime in that past year or severe housing instability. Now, that number has gone down several percentage points since then, but the heartbreaking situation that we read about and that we know about throughout the city goes often undetected and undiscussed. And that's something that I won't, and I know it's something that all of us up here will not accept. So immediately we brought together the partners. It's the convening power that you see behind us in this resource center. But we brought together LAUSD, our housing authority, LASA, and our friends at LA Family Housing. That's 3 levels of government plus a service provider in the nonprofit area to pilot a special program that would address families' needs and helping them get to a permanent place to live. We started with the area around Telfair, and we started with 50 vouchers for vulnerable families with children who need the most help. And as of the start of this year, we got just about all those vouchers into the hands of people who need them. Actually, I think Doug said we have all 50 now matched. And today, we're proud to announce that we're expanding that partnership tenfold to a total of 500 vouchers to take it to other areas of Los Angeles for many other families who are experiencing housing insecurity. And I'm very proud to work with this superintendent on so many things, but when Superintendent Buettner came to me and said, we really want to make this a priority, he has made that a priority. We'll hear from him in a moment, but I want to thank him and Doug Guthrie, who, when there's no vouchers left, he somehow squeezes a couple more out, and I appreciate that he made this a priority too. So let me hand it over to the superintendent to say a few words, then to Doug Guthrie to say a few words, and we can hear where we're moving from there. Thank you, Superintendent Buettner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. And we are pleased to be working alongside the city to help address the needs of those who are most vulnerable. It's fitting we have this conversation today because it's 50 degrees and raining outside. An awful night to be on the streets. Now imagine you're a child and you got to school this morning. You went to school hoping to learn, hoping that education will give you a brighter future. We see children like this in our schools every morning when the first hot meal they get is in our schools. Among our students who are experiencing homelessness, the official number is about 17,000. But that, I think, is a pretty conservative count. If you think of those who live in fear of putting their name on a form, those who are intimidated by the threats of ICE raids and others, it's probably close to double that number. Close to double that number living with some form of housing insecurity. Now, the issue affects us all. It's our shared responsibility. That's why we're working alongside the city and the county to be part of the solution. In Los Angeles Unified, we're taking some steps ourselves. The first is we're working with the city on this partnership, addressing the issue first in Telfair, tenfold increase in the program to try to begin to help children and their families across the city. Our staff are represented at the coordinated entry sites, working alongside other professionals. We can refer from our schools, families we know are in need of help. We can also help place families and their children in schools near where they can find shelter. We're making the paperwork simpler on our end so that families have less fear and it's easier for them to self-identify and reduce the stigma of being identified as needing support. But that's not enough. We need to do several things which we think will help. The first is we need to better share information between the city, the county, and our school district. We each have information about part of the picture. Together, we have more of the picture and can better coordinate our services. We do this in foster. For children in the foster care system, we share information between the city, the county, and the school district. We need to do the same thing when it comes to homeless services. In addition, we need to look at funding. Schools are not funded for this. In the state of California, we receive all of our funding from the state. We receive a supplemental grant for students who are living in poverty, for students who are English learners, for students in the foster care system. We receive $0 to address or provide extra help for those 17,000 students and their families who need help. We can do more if we have the funding to do the job that we can do. This issue of homelessness is the great challenge a community like ours faces at this time in our history. We're privileged to be part of the team leading the charge to try to make a difference. We can do more. We have to do more. because when I get up in the morning, I think about those children coming to school and come to school with us, as Steve Lopez so artfully chronicled. Their journey is not a journey that is right in a country as rich as ours, in a community as rich as ours. We have to do more. We're going to do more. We're privileged to work alongside the mayor under his leadership, Doug Guthrie. The mayor talked about the voucher program. I can't say enough about the work Doug did. This is really an initiative that is leading not just in this state, but in the nation to put our children first. That's what we try to do every day in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think I couldn't have said it better, so Doug Guthrie.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Superintendent, as well. This is a very exciting program. I know when the Superintendent and I got together for the first time on this, I thought it would take some convincing with all the other things he had on his plate. It took about 3 minutes to convince him that we needed to do this, and we needed to do it immediately. And we structured this as a pilot, brought in great partners in LASA and especially LA Family Housing to undertake this effort. And I think, and we didn't really sign an agreement until mid-October. And since mid-October, we've matched all 50 families. We've got vouchers out there issued, LA Family Housing, providing wraparound services. The school district has been working closely with extra counseling that's involved here. There's a compact with the families that come on board with them saying they've got a commitment to support their child in school. They have a commitment to make sure that that child is going to be having a good attendance record. They're going to come in for counseling purposes. So we think this is a really good comprehensive approach to this. And I know, once again, we started out with this as a pilot for 50 vouchers, specifically targeted. And, you know, the mayor and I talked about this and said, you know, we don't have time for pilots. You know, we need to move forcefully. This is the right thing to do. So we've agreed, and we've figured out a way to do this, to expand this immediately to up to 500 vouchers, and to be targeted to the service planning areas around the city. We'll be identifying the right service providers out there, matching it up with those schools that have high incidence of student homelessness. I think, as everybody can imagine, it's tough enough just being a student and you know, having good practices and getting the education that you need. It's next to impossible if you don't have a place, a stable place to sleep at night and to put your head. And so we look at this sort of housing as a platform for a variety of things, in this case for educational achievement of those that most need it. So we're excited to be part of this, and we look forward to rolling this program out very quickly. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Doug. Thank you, Austin and Doug, for your leadership. All these facts and figures. Sorry?
I just have to go. Quick question. Could I sneak it in here?
I think if we start, I want to be fair to everybody. So, but I know folks may be peeling off. So if you want to do individual interviews with them, you can grab them. So, but nothing makes this more powerful than I think one of the people who's been involved. Hearing Angelinos actually tell direct stories, and it's her first press conference. She's a little nervous, but I know she's going to do an amazing job. Blanca Ahumada is here. She lives in South Los Angeles right now. She wants to move to the Valley so she and her husband and their 6 children, now 7, can be closer to family. Her baby is actually with us, 2 months old, Esmeralda. And ever since losing a job in retail, and people always ask again, where does homelessness come from? It can be one job loss. She hasn't been able to pin down work for herself, and her partner gets only inconsistent gigs as a day laborer. They struggle, and they were doing everything they can to be great parents to their children, to get by, to make ends meet, and to provide the best lives for their kids. But then on top of that, the landlord raised the rent. And well, we know the story. They couldn't afford the bills, lost everything, moved the family between motels using whatever money they could cobble together. And too often the kids had to miss school. And as she told me, a motel doesn't work when you have that many children. You need 2 rooms, and they can't even be together. And when they did make it to the classroom, they never knew where they were headed after the bell rang. Ultimately, Blanca started receiving support from LA Family Housing for basic needs and supportive services like housing navigation, access to schools on wheels, a great program I'm very involved with here in Skid Row, connection to benefits, and finally, Bridge Housing. They finally received a Section 8 voucher, found housing, and that, Blanca said, meant a warm bed, a sturdy roof, and a world of difference. She is the reason we do this work, and for all the Blancas that are out there. So I wanted to give her a chance for you to hear her story firsthand. Blanca?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm nervous. Hi, thank you for having me here today. When my family could no longer afford the rent, we were evicted from our apartment. I was instantly overwhelmed because I couldn't do anything to fix it. A week of motels was $480, and our family was so big, many apartments turned us down. We did have some money saved, but not enough to stay in our apartment, and barely enough for gas to get around the city. We didn't have enough food. We didn't even have housing. For over a year, all we had was each other. Every single day that I was on the streets and bouncing from motel to motel, I thought, how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna feed the kids? I cried myself to sleep every day. My kids also struggled. They had to switch from schools, how to say goodbye to their friends and teachers. Some days getting to school was impossible. In my shuffle of moving from place to place, eventually they fell behind. Things like homework, after school activities, take a backseat when when your stomach is rumbling or when you are constantly on the move. We couldn't seem to catch our breath. Homelessness was especially hard on my eldest son. He is autistic and had a hard time with change. He really needs structure, and moving made it very difficult, and it made him very uncomfortable. When we were homeless, he got angry and even aggressive, which made things even more difficult for our family. Most parents want the best for their children. As a mom, not being able to protect them from homelessness was truly the hardest feeling in the world. When I got connected to LA Family Housing, slowly and slowly things started to change. LA Family Housing helped us with motels, hygiene, supplies, clothes, and access to food. Eventually, they told us that we were going to receive one of those special vouchers, which I am very thankful for. I honestly could not believe it. It literally changed everything. Not only can we afford a place to live, but we can stay in the valley closer to my extended family and to school. It's a big relief to know that we will be truly stable and that I won't be packing our things every day. When I think about the future, I just want the best for my family. To me, the best means coming home to a warm bed and a safe place where we can just be. A place where my kids don't have to worry about where they're going to sleep or what will they eat or even where they're going to shower. Homelessness is hard, and it's not just going through it, it's recovering from it too. My kids are happy, but I can still hear their worry in their voice when they ask, are we gonna stay here or and how long do we have to move? My husband and I know that we're going to need structure and a safe environment to be successful. The additional support from school will only help us after missing so much school. My children really need the academic help in order to get back on track. Knowing that my autistic son will get to go to school, to the same school with the same teacher and the familiar community is amazing to me. I get excited just thinking about the progress he's going to make. I'm much more hopeful now, and it feels good to know that we can have all just a better future.
Thank you, Blanca, so much. I know that the superintendent and Doug Guthrie may need to peel off. Feel free to. Thank you again, Superintendent, for your leadership. And thank you, Blanca, for sharing your story. It showed a lot of courage, and we really appreciate you so much. And I hope it will help other people come forward as well. Every family, every Angelino should have a place to call home. It's a human right. And as Blanca's powerful story makes clear, a steady home is a linchpin of security and consistency that every child needs. We have no greater responsibility as a city. Second announcement I want to talk about is where stability has always been a challenge for almost 50 plus years, Skid Row, the epicenter of this crisis. Kirkpatrick Tyler, who I always introduce or reintroduce, is the first person solely responsible from City Hall for Skid Row, working together with the council office and Council District 14 and others, and the county, who has had an unprecedented focus. We know that people living on the streets have everything that they own with them. And though our city isn't always perfect in terms of how we try to protect the rights of these Angelinos and serve them to the best of their ability, we do strive for perfection every day. We know the one story of something being taken that somebody needed might make the news. The 999 ones where we do it well don't. But I want to appreciate those workers who try to do that every single day to keep our sidewalks and streets as clean and clear as possible. But one of the problems we've identified with encampments is that folks don't have the security of knowing where their stuff will be. And this is an issue that our care teams, our sanitation workers, spend a huge amount of their time on, engaging with unhoused neighbors, asking what they need, learning their stories, figuring out where they need help, and clarifying that we aren't law enforcement. We are here to help them. Storage is a huge part of that puzzle, especially on Skid Row. So we are very laser focused on this neighborhood, whether it's the disproportionate African-American homelessness that we see there, the women that are there, and we made some announcements last month about that. But we want to have better storage for Skid Row. So right now, we have about 1,400 units of bin storage, in Skid Row for an unsheltered population of about 3,000 people. You can see the disconnect. Not even half as many bins as are needed. And a total population, including those that are housed on Skid Row, sheltered, of 4,000. So today I'm announcing that we're going to more than double the storage space in Skid Row, using Skid Row HEAP dollars from the state to take us to a total of 3,000 units of storage, making storage available to every Angelino living on the streets who's unsheltered in this area. And this isn't just about bin space. It also is a new site operating at 538 San Pedro, alongside the existing location at 540 Town Avenue, both of which incorporate community spaces where we can deliver services, resources, connect people with solutions. It's a massive step in the right direction in Skid Row to provide safe options for our most vulnerable neighbors, to keep their possessions safe so that they can get connected with the services that will get them off the streets. And we couldn't have done this without the partnership with Councilmember Jose Huizar, our friends at Council District 14, and our friends at LASA and Chrysalis. So I want to thank them for getting over the finish line. Third announcement, as all of this is happening in our schools in Skid Row, we have one more key effort to highlight. The rains of this past week have underscored it. Years ago, I authored legislation to open up shelter year-round, not just literally. We used to have to take out a thermometer, and there was a temperature by which we could open shelters and not. I changed that as a city council member, and we see how vital and urgent this is when a storm rolls in. That's why every year on December 1st, we officially kick off our winter shelter program, where folks can find shelter 24 hours a day, and it's someplace that's warm, dry, and safe. That was the plan this year too. But then a storm came early, ahead of Thanksgiving, and we had to act. So that's why the City Council and I partnered with the County Board of Supervisors to open 685 emergency shelter beds last Wednesday, adding capacity immediately to meet that need. These shelters were housed at city facilities, 5 city rec and parks facilities in Sylmar, Venice, Westchester, Echo Park, and Glassell Park. Talking to Deputy Mayor Christina Miller, who's here, she said, it was Amy Perkins who works with her, told me everybody wanted to get this done. It was the spirit of Thanksgiving. Folks who were working around the clock, city employees, volunteers, and others. And right now we have 1,232 beds at 16 locations across LA County that will be open through the end of March, helping people find that temporary place to rest their heads. And each program site has services that are supporting those folks and housing assistance. So even in a place that has extraordinary weather, it showed that we can step up. So let's go to those 4 strategies now: street strategies, shelter, housing, and our partnerships, and get some updates on those. We all know that this fight starts on the streets. That's where too many Angelinos live in encampments. It's where we pick up too much trash. and dealing with the sanitation issues we have. And we know it's where the most important place that we can bring social services, outreach, and healthcare. While the county, as we know, statutorily leads on health, a lot of people don't know that. City doesn't have a single hospital. We don't have a single mental health program. We don't have a public health department. We work really well with our county on that. But we also look, because whether it's our firefighters who respond to medical emergencies or others, for creative and innovative ways to improve health on our streets. That's why I'm proud to announce today that my office is working with UCLA Health and the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA on piloting a program to bring medical care directly to people on the streets of LA. We think this can be a game changer. And our shared vision is to have UCLA medical and health professionals join our cleaning and rapid engagement or care teams to bring their expertise and services to different parts of the city. In the old days, it was led by police. Then people came in. Folks saw them as sweeps. We've changed that listening to advocates, where we lead now with sanitation workers who connect with people, get to know them, have training in de-escalation, training in ways to be able to connect. Now we're bringing the doctor as well to provide vaccinations or referrals to health clinics and hospitals, dispensing medication. This represents a necessary expansion of really getting people on the street to feel human so that they can move off of the streets. An extra degree of help and healing to our neighborhoods, and healthcare workers who can address individual needs. So far, UCLA has already sent out 1 doctor and 6 medical students to 3 locations, served nearly 30 patients, and they just went out with a hygiene trailer yesterday. This is just the start, and as we track this, we will bring more information on this as well. But we know that there are other things that we're focused on the street, including safe places for folks to park. Too many people live in their vehicles, some of them in very vulnerable positions. We lost an unhoused Angelino when a car crashed into them as they were sleeping in the valley last year. So to make this happen, as we've announced here before, we're expanding safe parking sites. The city is partnering with the faith community. My own synagogue has one of these. The county, LASA, to open up parking lots during the night when they are not utilized, to provide housing assistance, vehicle maintenance, security, bathrooms, cleaning services, help with your registration, paying off tickets, all of that. And we've increased just this year alone from $350,000 to $1.6 million in funding. And we're committed to adding more spaces. And we're going to lead by example. So I'm proud to announce that today we're going to be opening up 30 spots at our convention center as the newest safe parking location. And thanks to the leadership of Don Liu, where's Don? Right there he is, hiding back there, who said, you know, those parking spaces at the convention center, we've seen them all. There's a couple times a year when they're totally filled. The rest of the time, there's excess capacity. These spaces will be available starting January 2020, the result of a partnership between the Convention Center, Safe Parking LA, private funders, Councilmember Curran Price, and my office. And they're perfect places for people to connect to services, have a safe night's sleep, have case management and support with their car registration and insurance, a gym membership for access to hygiene, exercise, and connection to their community. We're always looking for more sites, so anybody who's watching this, please contact us. If your church or synagogue or house of worship is available, as I mentioned, ICAR, the place that I worship, is participating, as many others are. So whether it's a mosque, whether it's a temple, we need you as well. Last piece of our street strategy updates, we're remaining laser focused on keeping our neighborhoods as clean as possible. This is a monumental job and not for the faint of heart. We've expanded, as you know, the basics of sanitation and trash pickup. We've reached out directly to Angelinos living in encampments so they can help clean up where they live as well. And right now, our care teams are out in full force. They're conducting cleanups, leading outreach, they're learning people's names, they're connecting them with services, and they clean those areas and work to improve the lives of those folks at the same time. So I wanted to report, because last time I said they were rolling out, in less than a month and a half, we are already seeing those results. We've doubled the number of cleanups performed. I know this won't scream the headlines tonight, often it's the opposite, but I wanted to share the good news. From an average of just 800, which is still a lot per month, to more than 1,700 cleanups in October alone. And while I'm not satisfied driving through the streets of LA, none of us should be yet, you can see the difference already. I can see it. I've witnessed it in many places. There are plenty of places where we can see the result of the hard work that's happening, and we're going to continue to update you on that as well. Here's some of the results we achieved citywide in October through the first 2 weeks of November. Since the program launched October 1st, Care and Care Plus teams provided outreach services 1,600 times. Remember, these are sanitation workers with LASA workers together, to unsheltered individuals, referrals to mental health care program, et cetera. In October, as I mentioned, 1,700 actually 1,786 cleanups at homeless encampments. We removed 1,577 tons of solid waste, 4,854 sharps and needles, and 4,800 pounds of hazardous waste from our city streets. And in November, we had similar numbers. Our sharps were nearly doubled. We had 5,695 pounds of hazardous waste and operations in 1,600 locations. In total, we have visited encampments in just 2 months, 3,347 times, taken 13,000 sharps and needles, 10,500 pounds of hazardous waste, and 3,000 tons of solid waste off our streets. I know those numbers can be a lot to take in, but it is evidence of how much work is happening. 430 new trash receptacles are around the city with automatic pickup with trucks, and we have 300 more on the way. So to Angelinos who are fed up with the streets being dirty as I am, help is not only here, more is on the way. Second, let's turn to shelter. The homeless crisis is about a lot of things, but we know the quickest way to get someone off the street is with shelter beds as we look for permanent housing. And thanks to our Bridge Home shelters, Los Angeles is adding more beds at a faster clip than any city or county in America. And together with the great work of the County of Los Angeles, who's adding beds through the county, we are more quickly being able to rapidly move people off our streets. Since the last time we gathered, we opened up our 9th Bridge Home shelter, the Imperial. I should have actually thanked Doug Guthrie before he left, because it's Housing Authority property in Watts. It was Imperial Bridge Home Shelter. That's 100 more beds, 70 for men, 30 for women. And the Salvation Army is providing services on site. We remain on track with my goal by the end of the fiscal year on July 1st to have about 2,000 beds and 26 sites open throughout Los Angeles. 4 more motions, I'm excited to say, that the City Council put forward, covering 5 more locations, have been added to those 26. Together, that would be 31 separate locations. And when they're added to the tally, that's an even larger stock of beds, a shelter to address this crisis now. Before we make that happen, let me update you on a few of the shelters that are moving forward. Council District 7, with Councilmember Rodriguez and Supervisor Kuehl, construction started on the Sylmar Armory project in early August. That's 85 beds for women experiencing homelessness in the San Fernando Valley, and LA Family Services will be the service provider. Council District 9, right here, south of us, Councilmember Price and Supervisor Solis, and thank you, Supervisor Solis, who found the county land. The Hope Street Shelter, which will be in a parking lot owned by the county, started back in September, and construction we expect to be done in February. It will be ready for residents. That'll be a sprung structure with 100 more beds for men and women. In Council District 10, with Councilmember Herb Wesson, the Western Avenue site, which is on his field office, talking about leadership by example, we'll have 15 beds for unsheltered women-led families and single women, and they will get trauma-informed care that too many women on our streets need. This project is going to be open in the end of February with 1736 Family Crisis Center on site. Also in Council District 10, near MacArthur Park and Lafayette Place Shelter in Koreatown, 70 beds for men and women in the Salvation Army are under construction. Last up are 2 Bridge Home shelters in Council District 11, Councilmember Bonin. The Sunset Shelter, the biggest of all of them, which will 100 beds for adults and 54 beds for transition-age youth, supported by PATH and a Safe Place for Youth. And the second is at the VA. I'm very proud of the work that we've done to reduce veterans' homelessness in this city. We'll have temporary housing and services for 100 unsheltered men who have worn our nation's uniform. All told, that's 524 new shelter beds coming online in early 2020, on top of the 519. We will double in the next 3 months the number of the shelter beds that are here, halfway to our goal, which we will double again by July 1st. We're going to keep pushing forward as fast as we can to get bridge shelter, but we know that is only a temporary spot. So a third update, as always, is on our permanent housing. 2 days ago, we broke ground on Casa de Rosas in South LA. It's going to host 37 units of supportive housing for formerly homeless single-parent veterans and their children. A collection of some of our bravest Americans with services and a roof over their head, with daycare for their kids, a library, a place of meditation and peace. The Ward Economic Development Corporation and a host of community-based organizations lead, with most of the construction workers being local. Second, projects like Casa de Rosas give us a lot of hope for what lies ahead. We now have 100, I think it's 149, permanent supportive housing projects either open, in the pipeline, and or under construction, representing now 10,564 affordable and supportive units and 118 of those with HHH funding. Together, we're going to add over 11,500 bedrooms that didn't exist, more than 7,000 of them which will be supportive housing for formerly homeless Angelenos. And two critical steps I'd like to report since our last briefing. First, our first HHH-funded housing project at 88th and Vermont will be done and ready for occupancy by the time the calendar turns to 2020, by the new year. And second, with the commitment of HHH financing to development in Chatsworth, we can now say that every single city council district will have an HHH housing project, a commitment that council members made and that I am excited. Many of them have already surpassed the commitment of 222 units. Some still are working to get there, but every single council district now have those permanent supportive projects underway. And as we look at these markers, I also want to offer a quick update on several supportive and affordable projects that are under construction and at least 50% complete. Four of them are HHH-funded projects, as I mentioned, at 88th and Vermont, which is 94% complete. That's 62 units for very low-income families, young people, veterans, and households with special needs. Second, in Rampart Village, there's Path Metro Villas, 74% complete with 90 units of permanent supportive housing for folks living on the sidewalks of that community. You just have to drive by Path and see who those folks are. In Skid Row, there's 649 lofts, which is 55% complete, 67 units for folks here in Skid Row, and Casa del Sol in Sun Valley, 85% complete with 93 units for homeless and chronically homeless individuals with mental illness needs. Next are three projects backed without HHH dollars. In West Adams, Ibarra Village, 94% finished with 64 units in the work, and Westlake, 7th and Whitmer Apartments is 89% done with 76 units. In East LA at First and Soto, actually Boyle Heights to be exact, TOD Apartments, Phase 2 at 2423 3/4 East First Street at 78% done with 29 units on the way. I could go on and on, but I want Angelenos to know where they are. I want them to know that they are being built. I want them to know how many units are getting leveraged by your tax dollars. And we see this everywhere, whether it's seniors and veterans in Sun Valley, where we have 90% complete, 96 units. In Westmoreland and seniors in Pico Union with almost 100 units, 85% complete. Pico Robertson Senior Community in West Pico that's 70% done with nearly 50 units. Altogether, that's almost 700 units for our most vulnerable Angelenos spread across LA. Because this crisis affects all of us in the city, let me say one last thing on housing. We have extraordinary professionals, and our Deputy Mayor, Christina Miller, and her entire team know how valuable and valued you are. Whether it's here at the UHRC, folks working on emergency outreach or getting our Bridge Home work done. But I'm proud to introduce the newest member of our team, our new Chief Housing Officer, Amy Anderson. And I can't say enough about what Amy brings to the table. There she is. Should have a little map up here. She's a leader who I've worked with closely. She's developed affordable housing in our city across LA County, all the way up to San Jose through her role as executive director at Path Ventures, one of our best nonprofit builders. A public servant who's helped oversee unprecedented homeless emergency assistance program for our state, as a member of our Homelessness Coordinating Financing Council. And she's an incredibly experienced hand in policy, in production, and also in moving forward a vision. She's been a commissioner for planning and housing in Santa Monica, and she's already hit the ground running. So I have no doubt she will take us to the next level. I wanted to welcome her, introduce her to Los Angeles as well. And at each of these briefings, by the way, I could talk about our work to reverse decades of disinvestment in housing and homelessness programs at state and federal level. As the White House and others and HUD have come to Skid Row and looked in ways, I often point them to the very cuts that have happened out of Washington and, in fairness, out of Sacramento. We calculated in the big speech I gave on housing each year that I gave last week that it was about 20,000 units of housing we could have built in just this last decade if those cuts hadn't happened. 20,000 units if they just maintained the funding levels from the state and the federal government that we had 10 years ago. When you look at 30,000 people on the streets, imagine what a difference that would have made. But we are doing things to advocate for innovative policies, increased aid, and partnerships to confront this emergency head on. And the legislature I know is on recess, and Congress is gridlocked and maintaining its funding seems like week to week. Our advocacy still continues. I spoke with Governor Newsom recently in Long Beach. We sat down and talked about ways to expand some of the great work on CEQA reform, the HAP dollars, which we need to make permanent, or at least a decade-long commitment. And at that speech last week, when we were talking about the specific things we could do, I said that we have to make sure we are putting our actions where our words are as well. And I'm very, very proud of Los Angeles leading the way. This, as Jeff Millman from my team pointed out, this will never make the headlines, but it's arguably the biggest thing I will do while I'm mayor here, which is what happened at the Southern California Association of Governments when we talked about the amount of housing we're supposed to build in Southern California. I'm very proud that by a 43-19 vote, we reversed a methodology that would have placed housing again far away from where jobs are in places like Coachella Valley, not put the fair share where it needs to be, and LA was stepping up with just 20% of the population of the 20 million people who live in this region. We're going to be building 33% of the housing. We committed ourselves to that. And in fact, here in LA, if you look at the statistics from July, 1 out of 4 housing units in California were permitted in the city of LA, and only 1 out of 10 Californians lives in LA. So 2.5 times our population, we are stepping up and leading. But we need to make sure that happens in every single city, in every single county in Southern California. And I'm proud to say that 11 city council members stood with me, came to that SCAG meeting, and I want to single out David Rue, who gave one of the best speeches I've ever heard from him, talking about why it was time for us to do the right thing. Because we know people in the city of LA work in Orange County and vice versa. We know that we are tied together and traffic flows happen. After 4 decades of no growth and low growth and slow growth, look what's happened. But we have taken the commitment to increase by 4-fold what the production of our housing will be. And we've changed our zoning and planning to do that, a lesson Sacramento could learn from, where we're able to put along our transit corridors the density and the affordable housing that doesn't displace people, but allows them to grow their families where they live as well. In conclusion, we know this work isn't just about policies. As Blanca shared with us today, it's about people. I'm so honored to do this work. It's excruciatingly difficult work. I wish I had all the power in the world, that I was the wizard that could control everything, that we hadn't had decades of neglect. But none of those should be excuses for us to not all step up. And in the holiday season, when we talk a lot about generosity and the holiday spirit, I hope that we all will kind of redouble our efforts. Because it's not that the model doesn't work, it's that the model needs even more resources. It does work. It is saving lives. It is housing people. And now, whether it's the President of the United States or somebody volunteering here on the streets, we need all hands on, not to weaponize or to make this a partisan issue, but to come together and to solve this issue. Ahead of Thanksgiving last week, I had a chance to do my part helping put together meals for homeless families with the Big Sunday organization, which is the most amazing group of Angelinos. And I see in people's hearts that they want to help. And I want to make sure that people know how to volunteer in the holiday season. So a couple tips. First, coordinate your efforts with a community-based service provider. Don't just show up on a corner with a bunch of sandwiches. Talk to people who can actually engage in work that makes a difference. There are organizations that know who's on the street, what they need, what's most useful. Seek those groups out. Second, before you show up at a food bank or shelter with a donation, think about what would be most in line with our neighbors' lives and circumstances. What type of food is best? What folks can't always heat or store different options. What might be appropriate for people of different ages or cultural backgrounds. What clothing is suitable for the colder months. And finally, if you head over to Skid Row or another area and to hand out food or clothing, and you wind up with a few items left over, don't just leave anything on a street corner assuming somebody will pick it up. You'll probably just add to the clutter and garbage. So make a plan to collect and dispose of trash after you do that work. And if you have materials that still could be used, identify an organization to give them to rather than just leaving. And if you want to know how to get involved, we've launched a new homelessness volunteer corps for the city of Los Angeles. And you can go to volunteer.lamayor.org and find out what organizations are making a difference. Each month we'll be going to a different place in the city, a different organization, a different part of town, so you can learn how you can best be part of the solution. And I'm so happy to be in this city of angels, to see that work of all the angels, and to be a part of that in a small way myself. También en español, and I promise I'm not doing all that in Spanish. Gracias por estar aquí para la cuarta sesión informativa sobre nuestro trabajo para enfrentar la crisis de indigencia. Cada día nosotros nos sentimos esta crisis. Es una crisis humanitaria y las piezas centrales de nuestra estrategia están aquí. Limpiar nuestras calles, construir las viviendas de puente a casa, abrir las viviendas con servicios de apoyo y abogar por más inversiones y colaboradores de la parte de nuestros gobiernos estatales y federales. Hoy estamos enfocados en algunos anuncios claves para ampliar nuestro trabajo que ayuda y apoya a nuestros vecinos sin hogar. Con demasiados de nuestros más jóvenes estudiantes luchando con la indigencia, nuestro distrito escolar y la autoridad de vivienda se unieron para ofrecer vouchers a 50 familias al principio del año escolar. Pero ahora yo tengo mucho orgullo a anunciar que estamos ampliando ese esfuerzo 10 veces para ofrecer 500 vouchers a las familias desamparadas aquí en Los Ángeles, ayudando a las familias en zonas de nuestra ciudad donde demasiados enfrentan la inseguridad de la vivienda. Este es muy importante en una reflexión de nuestros valores en la ciudad. También nosotros tenemos un programa de refugio de invierno temprano y tengo mucho orgullo del trabajo de esta oficina a proveer más camas a la gente en las calles, especialmente durante la lluvia ahora. Y tenemos más de 1,200 camas disponibles hasta el final de marzo en estos tiempos y estos meses de diciembre, de enero y febrero. Para fortalecer nuestros esfuerzos en nuestras calles, estamos limpiando más, estamos construyendo más unidades de vivienda. Tenemos 150 proyectos en todas partes de la ciudad de apartamentos nuevos, representando más de 10,000 unidades nuevas de vivienda. Esta es la visión, a parar la indigencia, pero necesitamos también ayuda de Washington. Y brevemente, desafortunadamente, las noticias hoy de cortes de nuestro programa de food stamps, si Washington continúa a luchar contra las familias en nuestras calles, estará más familias en nuestras calles, aquí en Los Ángeles y en todas partes de los Estados Unidos. Espero que la Casa Blanca pueda reversar esta política del Departamento de Agricultura porque es muy, muy peligroso por la gente de Los Ángeles.